People who saved themselves for marriage and eventually got divorced. What was your approach towards ex after the divorce? Hi Reddit guys, subscribe now, or I will divorce my husband. In our conservative Lebanese society, after the first divorce, you get a free pass actually. Some people would talk about you, but a lot of conservative people would just tell them she's divorced, she can do what she wants. From what I've been told, my GF, Greek culture is very similar. You get a black mark which can be seen as bad, or completely liberating. Greek here, that's totally true. I'm in my mid-30s, divorced. Greeks usually don't get divorced, so I'm the black sheep. The old ladies at church ask if I'm dating, going out, etc. I feel like they're trying to live through me vicariously. And now half of Reddit is doing it too. This doesn't apply to me, but I do have a friend who is in this boat. His approach has been to swear off relationships and be celibate for the rest of his life. Well, that's one way to handle it, I guess. Sounds like he will be the only one handling it. Shoot, that was good. Just like his favorite Star Wars character, Han Solo. This is probably gonna weird people out that I know this, but my mom. I know she could be lying, but her and I are painfully open with one another. She was raised at a private Catholic school growing up and claimed she never had ex before marrying my dad in their late 30s, and I'm very inclined to believe her. They adopted us, me and my twin sister, when she was 43 and presumably couldn't have kids. My dad cheated on my mum with his current and third wife when I was 2.5, and my mum hasn't even been on a date since. She's very content with being single. She's 70 and has been single for 25 years. She said she got coffee with a guy when we were 4, but thought he was weird. She wouldn't qualify it as a date. I think my mum would go out with someone, but she doesn't care enough to look. She's not on dating apps. If she met some dude at the garden store and he just asked her out, she would probably say yes. It just doesn't happen. By and large, I'm pretty sure my mum just wants to hang out with my aunt, her sister and best friend, and garden. I kind of understand that with her. I'm married, in my 30s, and I swear, if my husband and I ever divorced, or if he died, I honestly don't believe I would date anyone again. I'm very content with being by myself though. I don't get lonely, and I don't get bored. If I did, I'd probably just go hang out with my best friend. I also don't have any desire to be with anyone else besides him, and I don't think that would change if we weren't together anymore. Learning to enjoy my own company was the best thing I've ever done for myself, but yet it almost handicapped my desire to find a mate. But they say love pops up when you least expect it, and that seems to be the truth for me. Mum didn't have ex for 8 years after getting divorced. She's a devoted Christian for sure. Unfortunately, she got drunk and ruined her 8-year streak. Got it on with my boyfriend's dad. Sigh. Are you going to be dating your stepbro here soon? Write this down, Pinhub people. I'm fairly certain they have this one covered already. This was my wife. We've been divorced for 3 years and I'm pretty sure she hasn't had ex since, and won't until she gets married again. So, she's apparently been true to her principles. Good question. I'm an ex-Mormon and was a virgin when I got married at 21. Was married for over 6 years. Had a good, active ex-life. And when I got divorced 2 years back, it was a strange new world. I was excited to have ex with new people, but I quickly found after a handful of hookups that it wasn't always that great. There were some exceptions obviously, but I often find that people who haven't been in long-term relationships are pretty lousy in bed. Having a bunch of one-night stands doesn't make you better at fricking, in my opinion. Getting to know someone's body and experimenting does. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't have saved myself for marriage. The best ex I've had has been after my divorce. I have a general rule now that I won't have ex on the first date. I like having more of an emotional connection with the other person. It's more enjoyable that way for me. Having a bunch of one-night stands doesn't make you better at fricking, in my opinion. Getting to know someone's body and experimenting does. This, so much. I dated a guy for a short time who was selfish, pushy and crap in bed. He would constantly bring up stories that gave him an excuse to talk about girls he'd fricked. He'd be telling me this awesome story about some crazy traveling experience, then just end it by yeah, sorry, but I had sex with her. Like, the story still made sense without telling me that. He told me he'd stopped counting at 51 night stands. He was absolutely terrible at sex. And the worst thing was, he wouldn't listen. You get better at sex by communicating and listening to what your partner wants. He did pretty much the opposite. One of my lifelong friends comes from an extremely Christian family. All 3 kids were taught how bad sex before marriage is. 2 of the 3 ended up with children out of wedlock. My close friend of these siblings saved herself, but ended up rushing into marriage with very little self-awareness and found herself in a completely sexually, and otherwise, incompatible marriage. All 3 are divorced at least once now. One has more baby mamas than I can keep track of. After my friend's divorce, she abandoned the no sex before marriage business. She didn't have any wild escapades, but developed strong sexual, and otherwise, chemistry with her now husband. Her parents still tried to shame them. It was a clusterfuck to watch over the years. I saved myself for marriage and thought my fiancé was super sweet and supportive for waiting with me even though he didn't want to. Turns out he was so okay with it, because he was doing other chicks behind my back. And he didn't stop doing other chicks when we got married either. Once we got divorced, I pretty much just didn't care anymore. I'm still not capable of having sex with someone I don't believe I'm in love with, but I don't care about virginity or body count or anything like that anymore. I've had 5 long-term boyfriends, so I've slept with 5 people total. I don't ever feel bad about it or regret sleeping with them. And I don't feel like having one night stands or casual sex is a bad thing by any means either. I just personally don't want to have sex with someone unless I believe I'm in love with them. Updates for those who have asked. I don't think I've actually been in love 5 times, but I thought I was in love 5 times, if that makes sense. I am still with my most recent boyfriend, who I've been with for several years now, and we are getting married once things get a little closer to normal in the world. So stop asking for my number. More updates. I realize that my wording in the original post may have been a bit misleading. We both came from very religious backgrounds and were both raised to wait until marriage to have sex. He told me this was what he wanted as well, but that he had struggled with it all his life. He constantly told me that I was his rock and I kept him on the right path, etc, etc. Throughout all of this time he was seeing other women behind my back while telling me to my face that I was helping him overcome his temptations. I was very open about the fact that he could come to me if he ever decided waiting wasn't for him, and we could decide what to do then, but he never did. Regardless of what happened while we were dating and engaged, once we were married I was always open and willing to have sex. I've always had an extremely high sex drive. Call it the church girl syndrome. However, even when we're having sex, he still continued to sleep with other women on a regular basis. This led to him getting another woman pregnant, which was the final nail in the coffin for granting me a divorce. When he finally came clean during the divorce, he said that he had lost count of all of the women he'd slept with while we were married. Well, the shotgun-toting father of the woman he accidentally knocked up while we were married forced him to marry her literally the day he legally could after our divorce. He got dishonorably discharged from the Navy Reserves for domestic abuse and fired from his job at the local prison, presumably for the same reason. He now works for his father-in-law's arborist business in Wisconsin, supporting his stay-at-home wife and their 3 or 4 children. The end. Final update. I am nowhere near as religious as I was back then, and I obviously have very different beliefs about sex before marriage now. When I got married I was 18 and had been very sheltered. Since then I have lived all over the country and seen plenty of things to help me broaden my mind and learn that there's more to the world than what you learn in church in a small Midwest town. I'm glad you found your sexuality within your comfort zone. I wasn't one to save myself, and I'm not against casual stuff, but don't prefer it. Good for you to find where you stand on the spectrum of what's comfortable, and good for you for coming to a point where what your partner used to do doesn't matter so long as how they are with you is on the up and up. Hope you'll end up with someone great. Whoa. What a freaking a-hole. I hope he's gotten the karma he deserves. Got married in my mid-20s, not realizing that asexuality was even a thing, let alone that I could possibly apply to a good Christian boy who had saved himself. Purity culture in some Christian circles can be a really rough time. We were married for about a year and a half, and I only ever came once from ex or exual interaction with her. It was really rough for both of us. The hit to her self-esteem, the belief that I was broken in some way. Over time we just stopped really trying. A whole lot of other factors played into the split, but that was definitely one of them. I spent a couple of years after avoiding all possible romantic entanglements, then ventured out a little and found some open-minded people who I briefly dated here or there. It was nice to be close to someone again, and I have found that I really like making other people have a good time. There is something immensely satisfying to me to be the cause of someone else's satisfaction, but it can be a little hard for a partner since I am so devoid of exual reaction. It takes a fair bit of reassurance and good communication to keep that stuff good and healthy, and so they don't feel like they are using me or that I find them repulsive or whatever. Still a work in progress, I guess. Didn't think I'd figure out I was ace from reading a comment on this post, but here we are, Mayo. Glad to my experience is useful in some way. I guess my only advice is not to jump to any conclusions too fast unless you are really sure. It took me some time to really settle into my own exual identity, and I do have one of those, despite not wanting X things done to me. But I know for some people a label or word just clicks perfectly, feels like putting on the most comfortable clothes ever, and that's them for life. Be aware that exual identity can change, and that it's okay for it to do so. I had to learn not to blame myself or feel like I had screwed up, but rather was learning about myself, finding my most comfortable fit for this stage in my life. Anyway, enjoy discovering yourself. Your experience is valid, valuable and important. Okay Reddit guys, subscribe now, or I will divorce my husband.